Hello again, you wonderful people. How are you? Are you well? I'm so gratified to hear that. Just as I'm gratified to know that it's time once again for one of the easiest parts of this gig. One of these videos where not only is it not actually Trek Actually, it's a not actually Trek Actually comment response video where the amount of labor that I have to put into this is just minimal, which I appreciate because, generally speaking, I'm a very lazy person, which I suppose you could have deduced from my chosen career. Anyway, this is the one where I respond to comments that you have already made on my most recent Star Trek videos. This is going to be great. I barely have to do anything. This first set of comments is from my most recent Trek Actually video about how 7 of 9 actually deserved better. And this first comment from that batch is from Spita, who says, imagine if, in Picard Season 3, 7 was the object the villains were after rather than Jack Crusher Jr. Nobody I know grew to care much about the character of Picard's son, but we all knew and liked 7 and would have felt something much more dramatically valid if she were the one placed in that jeopardy. Does it really make sense for so much of the emotional heart of a series ostensibly about Jean-Luc Picard to be invested in 7 of 9? That part doesn't really work for me, even though, yes, I agree with you, there was, much more of an attachment from most fans to 7 than there ever was or probably ever will be to Picard and Beverly's son Jack. But making Jack the focal point works better for the idea of, oh, hey, this show is supposed to be about Picard. But then you have the problem of, what do we do with all these legacy characters that we've randomly filled this show with, especially in Season 3 where they bring everybody back. And plus, hey, people like 7. She's a popular character. So we have to have something for her to do. So they kind of just find this random thing for her to do. Where, oh, hey, maybe she's the first officer of the Titan. Yay, she's in Starfleet now. Guess what? That's something she wants now. And they just kind of slot her in. And they give her an arc and they give her a story. And like I say in my video, she comes out a lot better than most of the other characters. But it still feels kind of sudden for her to, oh, hey, I want to be in Starfleet. And oh, hey, I want to be a captain. And, it doesn't feel right for her character. What you describe in terms of making her the thing the Borg want, even though we've kind of been there with 7 before, that's retreading familiar territory as well. But yeah, it works better in a lot of ways. But we have to remember, this is the Picard show. This show is about Jean-Luc Picard, or at least it's supposed to be. And it would feel a little weird to me for the final season of the Picard show to be so much about 7 of 9. Even though she's been a part of the Picard show the previous 2 seasons, she doesn't really have much of a history with Picard beyond that. You don't ever get the sense that they've gotten close or that they mean anything particularly special to one another. And it's like, I like 7. I think I made it clear in my video. I think 7 is a terrific character, but, when it comes down to it, Picard Season 3 became the TNG reunion show, and 7's a character from a completely different show. Gassi 555. I'd be on board with a Star Trek show with her as captain, as long as her first line is, computer lights. Isn't it so much brighter in here? We're on the flagship of the Federation, not a Borg cube. Right? And it's a beautiful set. The Titan set, the Titan bridge set, is a really nice looking set. Turn the fucking lights up so we can see it. Ina says, I never understood why they insisted on killing off or separating every single one of 7's children from her. The killing of Icheb, her last remaining, felt so pointlessly cruel. I think the operative word there is pointlessly. I personally have no great attachment to Icheb. I thought that the way they killed him off was gratuitously grim and gory and felt much more like, oh, look how adult and grim and gory we can be now. Huh? This ain't your father's Star Trek, like that kind of thing. And that turned a lot of people off. But the general idea, like, look, I'm not a big fan of the Icheb character. I don't think there was anything special about him. Fridging him to give 7 some motivation or to give 7 some tragedy or whatever. In theory, that's completely fine with me. Go ahead, kill Icheb. I don't give a shit. But the fact that they killed him in a gratuitously violent or sadistic way. And then that never really wound up going anywhere. I mean, it gave Seven motivation, I guess, at the end of that episode to come back and kill Bjayzl, but that's really it. And it feels like if you're going to off a character like that, who is an established character with an established connection to Seven, that should feed some kind of significant character development for her, and it really goes nowhere. So I don't really care about Seven having her children taken from her. I don't really care about the death of Icheb, whatever. But the idea that you would do that you would spend that character, that you would do that, use that trope, let's say, use that, fridging a character to give another character motivation, use that trope, and then it would ultimately just go nowhere. That's the offensive part to me. And of course, that's something that the Picard show did over and over and over again. Film cram! The writers seriously underestimated how much and how immediately we all loved Captain Shaw. Having him still be with us for a future 7 of 9 show would have been great. He was hardly a good Nazi that required a redemption death, just a by-the-book and proactively disrespectful member of Starfleet that acted as a great foil. To us, or at least me, a TNG mark. The mission statement for Picard Season 3 was to wrap up this show, not to leave this many dangling threads that could be picked up for a hypothetical future show that may never happen. So giving Shaw a closed loop, giving Shaw a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end, where you say he doesn't need it, but he does need it, because part of his story is being disrespectful to Seven's identity. Part of his story is he calls Seven by her wrong name, because he has decided that should be her name, and he doesn't care what name Seven wants to go by. He has decided, nope, you're Commander Hansen, you're not 7 of 9. And he comes full circle with that and pays her the respect that she deserves, and he does it. He chooses to use his final moments to do that, and there's a power to that. And because the show isn't continuing after this episode, or after this season, because season 3 is the end of the show, there's no reason to keep Shaw around. Because it's not a backdoor pilot for another series, it's the conclusion of this series, and you want it to have a strong, emotionally powerful ending. And I am grateful for every little bit from Picard, especially Picard Season 3, where they invest an emotionally powerful moment in an original character, as opposed to a legacy character that they've dragged out of retirement, to get the fanboys to go, oh, I remember him, right? Captain Shaw is an original creation for this show, and a good one. And they give him a really nice story with a really powerful conclusion. So I don't see why anybody would have a problem with that, unless you approach it from the mindset of everything should be setting up for the next thing, which I just don't. I'm perfectly happy for the Picard show to have concluded definitively, and now we can all move on to something else. DJ Chateau! Steve, make something new. Paramount. Okay. Steve, this sucks. This isn't the Star Trek I know. Paramount. Okay, we'll bring back what you know. Steve. Boo, this is pandering to nostalgia. Paramount. Fucking hell. Wow, this Steve guy sounds like a real asshole, just impossible to please. I'm sure glad that I'm not like that, and that no one who has watched my Star Trek-related videos, especially those I've made in the past several years, let's say since the debut of Star Trek Discovery in 2017, could possibly conclude that this make something new, no, that sucks, show me the old stuff, that sucks too attitude is remotely representative of how I feel, and have repeatedly said I feel, about the various more recent Star Trek series. Yes, I'm very, very glad that you are definitely not talking about me. Here's one from Matt S550. Given the rest of the writing, I can see why they renamed the Titan to Enterprise in Picard Season 3. That said, given Seven's relationship with Shaw and the fact that the Titan had its own history and heritage and helped save the Federation alongside the Enterprise D, I can't help but feel if you had to make her a captain, it should have been of the Titan. I do agree with you, though, it would have been better to see her explore the Fenris Ranger / skirting around the Federation's rules angle from Season 1. The renaming of the Titan to the Enterprise is one of those things that makes no sense on any level. It doesn't make sense from an outside the show perspective, because it's clearly just a ploy to pander to a certain subset of the fan base to say, look, everybody, it's the Enterprise. Seven's the captain of the Enterprise. We renamed the Titan to be the Enterprise. Isn't that cool? You love the Enterprise, right? Like, it's that, and that, so it doesn't work on that level when viewed from outside the fiction. And viewed from inside the fiction, yeah, it's like incredibly disrespectful to the Titan and the Titan's crew who helped to save the world. I mean, yeah, the Enterprise D, of course, had to be the one to really save the world because it was that kind of fucking show. But the crew of the Titan did their part, and their reward for helping to save the Federation? Oh, we're going to rename your ship to be like that other ship. Because your contribution can only be honored if we graft your legacy onto the legacy of this completely different ship. It makes no sense. It's hugely disrespectful. I could imagine if the Titan were a real ship, if this were all reality, like there would be a lot of people, including probably officers on that ship, who would be pissed as hell and would take that as a slap in the face. We aren't the crew of the Enterprise. We're the crew of the Titan. What about respecting our ship? You don't respect our ship and our sacrifice and our part in this battle to save our society by erasing us and naming us the name of some completely different ship. That's bullshit. No matter which way you look at it, in fiction or outside the fiction, it's fucking bullshit. Here's one from HDJKSA52. Steve, it's the 21st century. A lot of your viewers are not going to get that Felix and Oscar reference. Try to be a little more careful when you're making your video. Love your work and commentary. See, you have jumped to a false conclusion. You are assuming that I make references like that, expecting everyone in the audience to get them. And the truth is, I make references like that because I think they're funny. Here's one from Ashley Van Hammer. As much as I enjoy seeing you lay some thoughtful critique down on some of Trek's less glorious moments, which you, sir, are masterful at, all the mocking and ridicule of fanfic writing feels like punching down and made this uncomfortable to watch, almost like the teasing of a bully. The unexpected cruelty toward other fans, the unexpected cruelty toward other fans, often younger ones, creatives trying to express themselves, grow their craft, diminishing their harmless joy is really unworthy of some of the thoughtful, kinder calls to respecting others' takes on fandom in your other vids. I think I understand where you're coming from, and I just want to make it clear that I am not anti-fanfic. And in fact, I've written quite a bit of fanfic myself. I haven't written any for a while because I'm just too busy to do it. But it's not as though I'm holding myself above fanfic authors and saying, oh, look at what they do, those little fools. And, you know, I would never do that. Like I've done that before. I've done that a lot, especially when I was younger, right? When I was a teenager, I wrote tons of fanfic. I didn't write any Star Trek fanfic. It was mostly Batman. But like I've been down the fanfic road, and I do not mean to bully or take a shit on fanfic in general. My problem is when the writing of the actual show feels like fanfic. And hopefully we can at least agree that while fanfic is a beautiful thing, and while fanfic is a great way for young people and young writers and young aspiring writers to practice their craft, and it's a great way for fans of a particular thing to express their fandom and be creative in their fandom instead of just watching the show passively and liking it or disliking it. They actually get involved with it and create new stories with these characters that they love. Like it's something that is wonderful and fantastic and a beautiful part of fandom and a beautiful part of the internet that we can write these stories and have them published and have people read them. And, I'm all in favor of fanfic. But fanfic is a certain thing. Fanfic is representative of certain attitudes and certain approaches and certain interpretations of shows. And it's 99 times out of 100 not the sort of thing I or most people would want to see in the actual show. And when I watch one of the actual shows, when I'm not just reading like a Star Trek fanfic story, but I'm watching an episode of an actual Star Trek show that professional people wrote and made, and it reminds me of fanfic written by a 13-year-old, that's a problem. And that's not to denigrate that hypothetical 13-year-old who is just doing what they do and expressing their love of a thing through writing, which I think is great. But that 13-year-old's sensibilities are very different from the 20 or 30 or 40-something professional writer who is writing that show that I just watched. The show I just watched, and I feel like this isn't a controversial statement, the show I just watched should be better than the fanfic that the 13-year-old self-published. And if in expressing that, I put too much heat on the fanfic author, I apologize. I'm not meaning to bully the fanfic author. I'm just meaning to say when I watch an actual show, I don't want it to feel like fanfic. And here's one more comment from the 7 Deserve Better video from Will M. 1971. Yeah, had to cut this one off at minute 26. Star Trek Picard certainly traded off of nostalgia to a very high degree, but saying you'd rather see 7 trade off the nostalgia of a different series is a bit much. I think you slipped on a banana peel with this vid. I assume you're referring to my Knight Rider in space pitch? First of all, it was a joke. Second of all, even if they did develop such a show where it was 7 as a Fenris Ranger fighting for justice in the outlaw territories of the galaxy with a smart aleck talking spaceship. Like, even if that was literally the premise of the show, as long as you don't call it Knight Rider, and as long as you throw in enough original stuff into the show so it doesn't play as like a ripoff of Knight Rider, it plays as a show with a similar concept, but that is also doing a lot of its own stuff, I don't really see how you could accuse me or the show of trading off of Knight Rider nostalgia. It may be evocative of Knight Rider. It may be a show that will appeal to people who liked Knight Rider, but as long as you don't call it, Star Trek Knight Rider in space and, call the ship Kit and find a William Daniels sound-alike to do the voice of the computer, as long as you're not overtly directly, intentionally trying to connect that show to Knight Rider, I think it's more of a question of being reminiscent of another show from another franchise, as opposed to literally being a continuation of that show in an attempt to grab the audience from that show and get them to watch your show. So that's not what I was proposing at all when I said, let's do 7. It would be better if they did 7 of 9 Knight Rider in space. It was mostly a joke. And even if it wasn't a joke, it wouldn't literally be Knight Rider in space. Although, again, just speaking purely for myself, I would totally watch that show. Now, this next batch of comments is from my video about the best and worst couples in Star Trek. This one is from David Height, who says Star Trek's ultimate power couple is easily Zek and Ishka. Their temporary breakup nearly brought down the entire Ferengi Alliance. Their relationship also gives us both Iggy Pop and Kivon bumping into the walls of Empok Nor for eternity, so I'd call that a win. A lot of the comments on that video were people bringing up couples that I hadn't mentioned, which I really appreciate. And yes, Zek and Ishka is a big one. They were not only important in terms of like the fiction of the show, their relationship had meaningful repercussions on the fictional world of Deep Space Nine, but they were a lot of fun. Like, they were a fun couple. Their episodes were mostly good and were entertaining. So yes, I do feel somewhat bad that I forgot to I could have at least put them in that sort of lightning round list that I threw in near the end of the video, and I don't think I mentioned them at all. So yes, thank you for picking that one up for me. Grand Naga, Zek, and Ishka definitely deserved a mention. In the same vein, here's one from Broken Curtain. I think Sarek and Amanda Grayson, Spock's parents, are the best couple from TOS. I can see how they complement each other. Yeah, they are really complimentary because Sarek is a massive dick and Amanda puts up with it. Also, another one that I did not mention at all, and I should have, so thank you for catching that. Sarek and Amanda, for sure. And sticking with this theme, here's one from PSC WPLB. Shout out to Shax and Tana, one of the most violent Star Trek relationships of all time in a franchise that includes Klingons. There was great wailing and gnashing of teeth from the Lower Deckers because I neglected to mention any Star Trek Lower Decks characters in that video, and if I were to mention any couple from Lower Decks, it would have been Shax and Tana, because they're really the only one even remotely worth mentioning. So yes, Shax and Tana, they deserved at least an honorable mention in the lightning round. And they didn't get it, but they get an honorable mention here. So there you go. Here's one from Patrick Dodds, the EMH and the Vidian woman, Dinara Pell, from Voyager's Season 2 episode Life Signs. It's an innocent, simple, gentle romance, and the episode featuring them is, at least for me, the greatest single love story episode in the history of the franchise. The final scene when the Doctor is slow dancing at Sandrine's with Dinara in her true scarred Vidian form is truly a tearjerker. That's a good one. I would not quite go so far as greatest single episode love story in the history of Star Trek. I'm not sure what I would put ahead of it. Probably at least Kirk and Edith from City on the Edge of Forever, if nothing else. But yeah, a good episode and a good love story. Really good Doctor episode. One of the better Voyager episodes overall. So yes, absolutely worth mentioning. The Doctor and Dinara Pell from Life Science. Here's one from Quenta, Martok and Sorella, hands down best couple. Now see this one. This is one that I kind of went like that when I realized I had left them off. Yes, because not only should Martok and Sorella be mentioned because of their importance to the fiction, blah, 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 but they are absolutely delightful. Their relationship is so much fun and so entertaining. That sort of derisive, like that sniping back and forth, Martok greeting her as she comes out of the airlock, and she says, you look old or you look fat or something like that. And he says, yes, my deterioration is proceeding apace. And it's like this sort of long suffering thing from him. And it's a different side of Martok because he's always the guy in charge, the gruff, tough Klingon warrior. And now in comes his wife, and he is totally underneath his wife. Like he is, following in her wake and happy to do it. He worships the ground she walks on. And she treats him like shit, and he loves it. He has those moments when she'll make some cutting remark to him, and she'll walk away, and he'll turn to Worf or Sisko or who's ever standing there with him, and he'll go, isn't she magnificent? Like, it's just great. It's so funny and so much fun. And I really, really wish, of all the ones that people mention in the comments that I didn't mention, the only one I genuinely feel like, oh man, I should have mentioned them in the video, is Martok and Sorella, for sure. Now, these next several comments are from my video about the classic Deep Space Nine episode, Far Beyond the Stars. And this first one is from Sinister Intelligence, who said, when I first saw Far Beyond the Stars, as a black man, I immediately knew why they chose Ducat and Weyoun to play the cops. I wasn't a bit surprised. Not to mention Odo playing the status quo guy. It's like I say in the video, the reason that Ducat and Weyoun are in those roles as the racist white cops is so the show can tell us that this is what it has always been about. This episode isn't a departure from the series. This episode is just finding a new way of showing us, hey, this is what this has always been about. Ducat and Weyoun and the institutions they represent and defend, they are just our fantasy world's equivalent of what these racist cops were and are in our real world. Like that's how this works. That's what this metaphor stands for. And yeah, I would imagine a lot of black folks and a lot of folks who have experienced racism and experience especially institutional discrimination and the institutional cruelty that is visited on people of color in this country, who picked that up right away. That's one of the less subtle but also most powerful examples of Star Trek using its platform to make a very, very pointed and very relevant political statement. There's one from Telemarcheology. I'm an elder millennial, and the crazy thing about this ep for me is that it portrays a small-scale, intimate backlash against the very idea of a black space station captain. But when DS9 first aired, there was a very real, widespread and public backlash against a black space station captain on a Star Trek series by, 1990s racists. It's the other layer of metaphor underlying Far Beyond the Stars that I still find so profound. You are absolutely right. That is another level of complexity to the episode that I probably should have mentioned that I didn't mention in the video, and I'm glad you mentioned it in your comment. Just this idea of a writer writing a sci-fi story where the lead character is a black man and a bunch of white people having a huge problem with it and throwing a fit and saying, we can't do this, right? And the message of the part of the message of the episode is, what kind of an asshole would have any kind of problem with this? How big of a fucking asshole do you have to be? How much of a racist loser do you have to be to hear about a sci-fi story starring a black man in the leading role and you get upset about it? How much of a fucking waste are you if you actually got upset about that, you fucking loser? And it's an episode of a show where certain real fans of the franchise that show belongs to had that exact reaction a few years before. It's fantastic. Here's one from Eddie ZDI. I always felt that making Sisko a commander rather than a captain at the beginning of DS9 was the exact sort of compromise that Benny was asked to make in this episode. I have no way of knowing if this is true, but I can just imagine an executive from the network saying people wouldn't accept a black captain. I don't remember if that's exactly the way the story goes, but I know in the Deep Space Nine documentary, What We Left Behind, I think Ira Stephen Bear tells the story of originally Sisko was a commander, and it was the creators of the show who made the decision to make Sisko a commander. But this was before Avery Brooks was cast. When they were creating the character, they initially envisioned Sisko as being younger. And then they cast Avery Brooks, and Avery Brooks was older than they had conceived the character to be, so they rewrote the part to suit Avery Brooks. And at one point during that process, they said, well, since he's a little older than we thought he would be, why not make him a captain instead of a commander? And it was at that point that, I don't know if it was Berman or some network executive higher up than him, but someone above the actual creative team of the show stepped in and said, no, make him a commander. And I don't think it was ever explicitly said, well, we have to make him a commander because the audience won't accept a black man as a captain. But that's obviously an implication that you can take. It feels a little weird to be like, well, wait a minute. If we only made him a commander because we thought he would be younger, and now he's older and he will have been in Starfleet for longer, and he has the service record that he has and all this other stuff we made up about him, why wouldn't he be a captain? And it's hard to imagine getting pushback from that if this was a white character. But because he's a black character, for some reason somebody was like, no, leave him a commander. Here's one from Ben Donatier. For me, Far Beyond the Stars is the best example of why DS9 works. It isn't afraid to show you an hour of television that, quote, doesn't matter to the plot. The story is important. It is important to Sisko's character. It is important to the themes of the show. And more importantly, it is important to the audience. Shows with dedicated 5-season story arcs or hyper cut down made for streaming shows can't really afford the filler or the offbeat, not strictly in character moments. DS9 took the time to breathe, and sometimes spent it on farce, and sometimes took us to the show's themes. I'm glad you put doesn't matter to the plot in quotes, and then went on to demonstrate why it actually does matter, because I think that's very important. I've seen a lot of people who don't like this episode, and I suspect the reason they don't like it is because it is a stridently anti-racist episode. And I'm not saying everybody who doesn't like it because of that, but there are people that I suspect don't like it for that reason, but don't want to say that. So they hide behind, it has nothing to do with anything. It's just this random episode where something happens completely unrelated to the rest of the plot. They want to sort of hide behind that, and they don't want to let on that they just had a really bad reaction to the fact that it's an openly, unapologetically anti-racist episode. Now, I'm not saying why they would have had such a negative reaction to an anti-racist episode. Wouldn't want to venture a guess. Who knows? We'll probably never know, but that's the reaction they had. But they want to say they didn't like it because, it has nothing to do with anything. But of course, it does have something to do with the rest of the show. It's not just a random episode completely disconnected from what came before and what followed. It's about everything that the entire series has been about up to that point. It is, in fact, about everything that Star Trek as an overall project has been about since 1966. it fits in perfectly with the rest of the franchise. It's completely in place. It's completely in context. And most people would realize that and recognize it if they had just a modicum of reading comprehension and they weren't completely overwhelmed by their reactionary, instinctive response to it. Here's one from R.M. Dodson Bills. As a middle-aged, cishet white man myself, I found that even realizing that I can't imagine, because I don't have the necessary experience, what it must be like is a revelation. If I try to put myself into the shoes of a character like Benny and find that I can't even imagine what that might be like, that's significant. I think I've told this story before, but I remember probably 10, 12, 15 years ago, I was picking up food in a Mexican restaurant here in town, and I was waiting for my food, and I realized, actually, I was with some other people, I was with some friends, and we were sitting in this Mexican restaurant, and I had a moment when I looked around, and I realized that, I think there were 3 of us, and I realized that the 3 of us white people were the only white people in this entire place. Everybody else was presumably Mexican, but, was Hispanic, was of Latino heritage. We're people of color. We were the only white people in the entire place. And I realized that I think that's the first time I've ever had that experience, where I was part of a minority group where we were the only white people in the entire place. And I don't use that example in an attempt to say, therefore, I know what black people are going through. Therefore, I know what brown people are going through. It's exactly the opposite. It's to tell myself, oh, I have no fucking idea. Because the closest I've ever come is being in a group of white people in a Mexican restaurant. That's the closest I can get in my actual personal experience to the experience of being a racial minority in a vulnerable position. And we weren't in a vulnerable, we were in no danger at all. But the idea of, oh, we're the only people from our racial group in this entire place. Everybody else is something different than we are, right? And we're the minority. That's the closest to that kind of experience I've ever had. So I really do have no idea what it's like. And it really is important when people who do know what it's like are having a conversation that I spend my time shutting up and listening and learning. And moments like that from Far Beyond the Stars, if that can open someone's eyes to that and help people along to that realization, that's a really, really wonderful and powerful and important thing. These next several comments are from my video about Major Kira. And this first one is from Captain Andy, who says, Kira is a good example of how terrorists become terrorists. Not through some inexplicable desire to kill people, but through a lifetime of oppression and desperation. She's a very good example of that, and because she is that, she's also a reminder for those of us in the real world that fighting terrorism is a long-term project and is about more than just catching or killing terrorists. Kira ceased being a terrorist when the reason that she became a terrorist went away. She became a terrorist against the Cardassians because the Cardassians were occupying and oppressing and genociding her people. And once the Cardassians left, she didn't find other people to kill because she was just a bloodthirsty killer. She stopped being a terrorist and she found other ways to contribute to help her society. And that's how it works in real life a lot of the time. If someone becomes a terrorist for a political reason because their people are being attacked and oppressed and brutalized, and they have been driven to a point of desperation where they can't think of anything to do other than lash out violently and try to drive these oppressors away. Once the oppressor has been driven away, they're not going to look around for other shit to bomb. They're not going to look around for other people to kill. They're going to say, oh, okay, I don't have to do this anymore. I'm going to find something else to do. And also, when you take away that motivation, you stop making future generations of terrorists. That's a lesson that we still haven't learned, or we refuse to learn in the United States and a lot of other Western countries as well. There's a reason that people joined Al-Qaeda. There's a reason people joined ISIS. There's a reason people joined Hamas. It doesn't mean that what they do is right or that what they do is acceptable. It means that what they do is coming from an understandable motivation. And if we remove that motivation in time, those terrorists will no longer exist. They will stop being terrorists because they will not have a reason to be. And we can't seem to get that through our heads. Here's one from Murky Hollow. Another great example of her complexity is the episodes, I believe at the end of the 5th season, when the Dominion recaptures Deep Space Nine at the start of the Dominion War, and Kira remains aboard the station as a liaison officer as a result of Bajor's non-aggression pact with the Dominion. She tries to respect the wishes of Sisko and the Bajoran government by working directly with Ducat and the Dominion to maintain the peace. It takes the suicide protest of a holy woman to make her see she has become a collaborator without realizing it. A lot of people pointed this out in the comments, and once I saw it, I realized I definitely should have mentioned that in the video because it is a really important part of Kira's character arc in the show. Yes, absolutely. It's a brilliant piece of writing, and it's a really important turn for her character. When, I mean, we've established before that, leading up in the series, we've established that, you know, Kira, a collaborator is the worst thing you can be. Kira is very anti-collaborator. And then, without even realizing it, she is one. And she has this moment of clarity when, oh my God, I have become the thing that I hate, the thing that I hate the most. I've become the thing that I fought against, the thing that I used to kill people for this, you know? I've become that. I've become a collaborator. And it happens so gradually she doesn't even realize it. And it's a brilliant arc on the show. It's a great story for Kira, and it's very important for her character and for the overall theme that I was getting at in that video. So I really, really wish I had brought that into my video, and I should have, because it's a vital part of Kira's character arc, and a big part of what makes her such a complex and compelling character. And I'm really glad a lot of people in the comments pointed that out, for sure. Here's one from TJ Zamboni Schwartz. Duet is my favorite single episode of Star Trek. It's a testament to just how good DS9 was that a first season episode managed to do that. Duet is a fantastic episode, and it is one of the best episodes Deep Space Nine ever did. And yes, it is impressive that they did that episode in their first season, that the show was so young and was able to pull off such a fantastic piece of work. But what has always impressed me the most about Duet is just the fact that the creators chose to attempt it at all. They're in their first season of a spin-off of a very popular show, of a very popular Star Trek The Next Generation. And they say, in the first season of our new show, we're going to try to do this, right? And they pulled it off. But the fact that they even attempted it is really telling to me of the kind of show Deep Space Nine was and the ethos of the people that were making it. There are two things about Deep Space Nine Season 1 that I think are incredibly important, that were decisions that were made that set Deep Space Nine apart from TNG. One is in the first episode when they make it very clear that Sisko does not like Captain Picard. I can't stress enough what a gutsy move that was, to say, here's the hero of our new show, and we just want to let you all know that he hates the hero of the other show. The guy you all love now, Captain Picard, the guy that is your hero, the star of the most popular Star Trek show? Yeah, the lead on the new show, Sisko, he hates him. He thinks he's a piece of shit. He blames him for his wife's death. And then the second one is Duet. That, talk about a throwing down of the gauntlet. Talk about a show in its first season saying, okay, check this out. This is what you're dealing with. This is not only what we are capable of in terms of dramatically, this is not only the kind of thing we are capable of making. We're going to go there. We're going to tell stories that are this serious, that are this heavy, that deal with real world problems in this way. And this is the kind of Star Trek show we're going to make. So if you're not up for that, if you're not, if that's not what you're here for, go watch something else, because this is the show we're making. It was a moment of defining what the show would be. And it's incredibly brave creatively, as well as, of course, just a fantastic hour of television. Here's one from BladeTVal. Kira is smart and pragmatic enough to recognize that if she simply refused to participate in Bajor's reconstruction, it would just proceed without her being able to have any input. At least by participating, as distasteful as it might be at times, Kira can help influence the process in the way she thinks is best. She may not get what she wants all, or even most of the time, but the compromises she is able to occasionally force are better than nothing at all. Kind of feels like a lesson that would benefit certain politicians these days. You are absolutely right, and perhaps even more importantly, it would also benefit quite a few voters these days. And one last comment on the Kira video from Ray Perry. So Maritza made a real Goldar heel turn, eh? Confession, Steve, I'm not a wrestling fan. I actually kind of hate it. I only know about the Dusty Rhodes promo because you riffed on it in your writer's strike video. But I'm struggling with major depression, Colonel Depression in the final season, and your shout-out was a real shot in the arm, so thanks. I think I just broke kayfabe. Well, see, but technically this is a comment-response video, so it sort of exists outside the boundaries of a typical Trek Actually video, so I don't think it's really breaking kayfabe if you do it here. Now, if you did it within the boundaries of an actual Trek Actually video, that would be like breaking kayfabe, like during a real wrestling show. Like a wrestler going on the Tonight Show and speaking outside of their gimmick. To me, these days, because everybody kind of knows what the deal is, that's not really breaking kayfabe. Like everybody knows, you know. But if you do that within the actual wrestling show, if you shatter the reality of the show within the show, you know, that's breaking the suspension of disbelief. That's like the modern equivalent of breaking kayfabe. So anyway, I wouldn't expect you to understand as a non-wrestling fan, but I want to thank you for a couple of things. First of all, thanks for, saying nice things about me, and I'm glad that I can help you through your depression. Thanks for the Dar heel turn pun. I think that's fantastic. I love a good pun. And thank you very much for that excellent major depression, Colonel Depression in the final season joke. I think even if you had broken kayfabe, all of that would more than make up for it. And these last several comments are from my video about when Star Trek gets it wrong. This one is from TalisGuy, who says, one silver lining of Profit and Lace is that Quark's change is handled on a drop-in basis off-screen. Given Rick Berman's refusal to acknowledge the existence of queer people in Star Trek except as a joke, this was definitely not the intent, but it does nevertheless imply that humanity's utopian future is one where barriers to medical care for trans people are so non-existent that it can all be handled in the space of an ad break. Which is unquestionably fantastic, and I saw other people in the comments pointing out the same thing, but something that occurred to me was it would also completely pull the rug out from this detransitioner bullshit, right? Because one of the issues with people who oppose trans people being given the opportunity to transition is, what about people who have second thoughts and want to detransition? But once you've, once you've had bottom surgery, well, you can't just reverse it. What about detransitioners? And of course, detransitioners are, that does happen. People do exist that have realized, oh shit, I shouldn't have done this. Very, very tiny percentage of people who transition. Not such a significant group that it should affect the rights of the rest of the group. But in Star Trek, in the 24th century, apparently, even if you do decide, oh shit, I need to detransition, this was a mistake, I thought this was something that it's not, okay, no big deal. You just go right back to the doctor and say, you know what, switch me back. And he says, okay. And 10 minutes later, you're walking out and everything's fine. So no matter, there's no excuse for being a transphobe. All of their supposedly, medically based, quote unquote, legitimate concerns, complete bullshit. Don't worry about it. If someone transitions and then it turns out that they want to change back, we can change them right back. Fuck it. No big deal. You're just a bigot if you have a problem with it. There's nowhere to hide. There's nowhere for bigots to hide in the 24th century when it comes to trans people. That's how far the medical technology has advanced. All the hiding places of bigots have been completely obliterated. What a fucking utopia. Here's one from Aiden F. Great video. I would also say, though, even if someone is accusing you or attacking you in bad faith, if they make a valid point concerning some unconscious bias you have, then you can still hear that and improve. Just because someone is an asshole, it doesn't always make them wrong. That's a very good point, and I know from personal experience that that is true because I am often an asshole, but pretty much never wrong. Here's one from G.S. Barlev. I was expecting to jump in to defend Prophet and Lace, but you summarized the nuance really well. What I think you got wrong was Rios and Picard Season 2. Rios didn't stay in spite of the racist immigration policies, but because of them. Since his introduction, he was portrayed as a hero looking for a just cause. In 21st century Earth, he found one. Timeline contamination be darned. The problem I have with this is that that's not in the show. You're reading that into it. You have to bring that to it in order to make sense of what Rios decides in Season 2. You can say, like, well, we meet him in Season 1 and he's a hero in search of a cause. Okay, I agree with that. But then why wasn't that, if that was intended to be his story for Season 2, and that was intended to be why he stayed behind when the others returned to the future, why wasn't that his story? Why was his story, oh, I'm staying in the 21st century because I fell in love with a girl and I really like the cigars and the peanut butter. They could have made the story, and they had every opportunity to, especially with him being arrested by ICE. They had every opportunity to make Rios' story, oh my God, this is where I belong. This is where I can make a difference. The injustice here is intolerable and I can help. This is the cause I've waited for. This will bring the meaning to my life that I've been searching for all along. I'm staying here to fight the injustice. They don't make that. That's not the story they tell in Season 2. You have to find that yourself and assume that that's why he did it to make it make sense. And that's not good writing. Good writing is, let's make that part of his story all the way through and say, so that the other characters recognize, oh, he's staying because he wants to fight injustice, because he has actually experienced it and he wants to do something about it. Right here in this point in history, timeline contamination be damned, right? They could have told that story. They didn't. After he escaped from ICE custody, it's never even mentioned again for the rest of the season. So if that's the reason he's staying, they probably at least should have mentioned it a time or two before the end, and they didn't. Here's one from Shin Gallon. I just started a rewatch of TOS, partially due to your channel putting me in a Trek mood, and I got to The Enemy Within, and yeah, I'd forgotten how really uncomfortable the scenes with Rand were, and how really not good that whole situation was handled. A shame, because the resolution, with evil Kirk not defeated by violence, but rather by good Kirk appealing to him, was surprisingly well written and well done. Still a pretty good episode, but definitely could have been better. Oh, I think The Enemy Within is a fantastic episode. I think it's a really good episode, but it just has that bit with Yeoman Rand being sexually assaulted by evil Kirk and then having to report it to, for all she knows, Kirk, the guy who assaulted her, and his two best buddies. Yeah, it's just gross. It's just not handled well at all. It's super gross. And it's a big, and then, Spock saying that shit to her at the end too. It's like, what the fuck was that? Like, it really brings the episode down. But apart from that, it's a really good episode. It reminds me a lot, actually, of A Matter of Perspective, which I also mentioned in that video, where Riker is accused of attempting to rape the wife of the scientist who dies when the space station blows up. That's a really good episode. It's a really good episode. And it makes those icky bits even worse, because you're like, oh, if they could have just found some other way to do this, or just left this out and made this something else, like, this would be damn near a perfect episode. But it's not. It's tainted because of this. And the tainted part, for me, only serves to remind me of how great the rest of it is, which makes it such a frustrating episode. And the same thing with The Enemy Within. Like, this is a great episode. Why couldn't they have just done something else for this bit here? Take this bit out, change this to something else, and man, you've got an all-time classic. And finally, last comment from General Jelly Roll. Unconscious biases are like walking around with parsley in your teeth. If someone points it out, it's not because they're trying to insult you by doing so. You should want to know it's there so you can fix it. What a perfect metaphor. That is the best way of saying it I have ever heard. It's such a good way of expressing it that I'm a little mad at you now. Because I didn't get there first. Yes, that's absolutely right. It's like having parsley in your teeth and then getting mad at the person for pointing it out. It's like they're not saying you did it on purpose. They're not saying you did anything wrong. They're just saying, hey, you probably don't even realize this, but just to save you future embarrassment, because I assume you'd want to know, there's this thing that you haven't noticed and you might want to fix it, right? That's it. That's what someone pointing out an unconscious bias to you is. That's all it is. It's not an accusation. It's not saying, oh, so you're saying I'm a racist? You're saying I'm a bad person? No, calm down. You've just got a little parsley in your teeth. I just thought you'd want to know. If you're completely fine walking around with parsley in your teeth like a fucking asshole, if you want to make the fact that you have parsley in your teeth your entire personality, go ahead, dude. I was just pointing it out because I assumed you were a rational, thoughtful person. Maybe I was wrong. Yeah, it's such a great metaphor. I actually have another one that I don't like as much as that, but that I'm going to keep to myself because I'm going to use it at some point as the basis for a skit. I haven't written it yet, but it's the same general idea. But I like parsley in your teeth even better. Damn you. Damn you to hell. And good job. Nice work. That's it for the comments that I'm going to be responding to this time. Thank you all so much for watching these videos and for leaving comments. Of course, there are so many more comments than I have time to get around to, even in long-ass fucking videos like this one. But I appreciate all the comments. I appreciate you all taking the time to watch these videos and to respond and to leave such thoughtful and intelligent and useful comments and point out things that I missed or that I didn't think about or challenge me on things or disagree with me or agree with me or do all the wonderful things, all the constructive criticisms. I appreciate it all. I cannot tell you how grateful I am for that. I am also grateful for those of you who have chosen to go a step beyond that and be a financial contributor to this channel, because I could not continue to do this without those of you who have made that choice. So if you like the video work that I do here on YouTube, and especially if you enjoy this Star Trek stuff and you want to help me continue to do it, please consider becoming a supporter of the channel by going to patreon.com/Steve Shives and becoming a patron at whatever level you think is appropriate for you, or by clicking the join button right here on the YouTube page and becoming a channel member. Same deal, right? If you become a channel member or a patron at $5 a month or more, you get a shout out at the end of the monthly regular Trek Actually video. Just a little way I have of saying thank you to those of you who become contributors. And yeah, that's it. We'll be back in a couple of months to do another one of these with another comment response. This is, by the way, this is comment response video number 30. It's not that I have done 30 comment response videos about my Star Trek videos. It's that I've had the opportunity to. It's that you have allowed me to. So thank you all so much for that. Thank you so much for being so interested in my videos that I have had the ability, had the opportunity to do 30 videos where I just respond to your amazing comments. That's awesome. Thank you so much. And I'll see you next time to do another one of these in a couple of months. I'll see you next week to do videos about a bunch of other stuff. I'm doing videos about all kinds of shit. But thank you all so much for watching. And thank you for supporting me in all of the various ways that you do. And I'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.